Today, we want to show you something that reshapes how repentance is understood at its core. For generations, repentance was taught as returning, going back to where you started, closing a moral loop, resetting your behavior.
I know I hurt you. I don't want to lose what we have.
You won't. I'm still here and I forgive you.
Thank you.
This understanding comes from the traditional linguistic roots of repentance. The modern Hebrew shav, meaning to return, and the common devotional interpretation of the Greek metanoia as turn back. Across centuries of preaching and teaching, repentance was framed as reversal, return, and reset, a horizontal motion back to moral origin. But the Əʋe categories reveal a deeper truth. Repentance is not return. Repentance is rise. It is not the closure of a cycle. It is the vertical correction of va, the life vector inside every human. What is va like? It is like a seed placed into the world the moment you were born. You did not choose its potential, but you must choose its cultivation. A seed sprouts on its own, but only becomes what it should be when guided upward. Before repentance can be understood, the nature of va must be understood. Va is the life vector initiated at birth when breath enters the body. It begins developing before the child understands growth, choice, or direction. A seed does not choose to sprout. It breaks open, reaches upward, and begins forming structure long before it understands what structure is. A child grows the same way, bones strengthening, mind unfolding, emotions awakening, all without conscious decision. This involuntary upward emergence is va. As life continues, va operates as an autonomous force. You wake up already thinking, already feeling, already reacting. Growth is happening before you make a single choice. That momentum is not personality, it is vectoral life. Va also functions as an inner program, what the Əʋe, the ancient Hebrew, calls b. Just as a seed repeats its genetic tendencies unless cultivated, b repeats familiar patterns unless redirected. You may try to stop being defensive, but defensiveness returns automatically because the program is running its script. And because va is autonomous, it must be cultivated into orbit, a stable, centered pattern of development. Without orbit, Va grows wild, scattered thoughts, scattered emotions, scattered actions. You've seen this in yourself. Waking up drifting between tasks, scrolling aimlessly, feeling unfocused. That is uncultivated Va. If Va is not guided, it either regresses into old patterns or grows into new chaos. Unguided development is never neutral. It is always backward or unstable. This is why repentance cannot be emotional apology. Repentance is vector stewardship, the intentional upward cultivation of Va.
The old model is like walking in a circle. You end where you begin, even if you walk with sincerity. Once Va is understood, the old model of repentance becomes clear. The traditional view teaches that repentance is returning to moral origin, closing a loop and resetting your position. But this motion is horizontal, not vertical. In this model, a person may apologize, feel sorrow, or reset their behavior, yet remain on the same plane. The cycle closes, but nothing rises. Sorrow becomes a substitute for transformation. Confession becomes a substitute for altitude. The person returns, but does not ascend. This creates the moral reset illusion, the belief that returning equals growth. But returning is not rising. Resetting is not transforming.
Vertical lift is like stepping onto a higher stair. Even one step changes your altitude. Now, the Əʋe model converges with clarity. Repentance begins not when you return, but when the vector moves upward. Every corrected flaw becomes altitude. This upward correction is not emotional. It is geometric. It is the stabilization of tendencies, the purification of motives, the mending of fractures. Repentance becomes the vertical redirection of Va, not the emotional expression of regret. As lift occurs, it must be followed by stability. Altitude is real only when retained. A new level is not genuine until the soul remains within it without collapse. Once altitude is retained, the new cycle begins at a higher plane. This is true transformation. The new cycle begins where the last one ended, not where the last one began.
A spiral staircase rises even though it circles. Each turn is higher than the last. When lift and stability repeat, something beautiful happens. The soul forms a spiral, the architecture of ascension. Repentance becomes upward motion, not circular motion. Each cycle closes at a higher plane. Each correction becomes a rung in the ascent. The spiral is the geometric signature of true repentance.
The vertical axis is like a ladder. Each rung is a virtue that lifts you higher. The ascent follows the vertical axis, the Əʋe ladder of suitability, purity, fairness, balance, groundedness, establishment, righteousness. These are not moral labels, they are altitude markers. Every corrected flaw becomes a unit of vertical gain. Repentance is geometry, not sentiment. To ascend this axis, the soul must practice ascensional stewardship, intentional upward guidance. Without stewardship, the vector collapses into lower cycles.
A garden left alone becomes overgrown. A soul left alone becomes chaotic. Nature reveals the same pattern. Neglected land becomes overgrown. Neglected Əʋe becomes chaotic. Repentance is the cultivation of the inner field. Outer order mirrors inner orbit. When a person organizes their environment, their emotions often stabilize. Orbit restored.
Repentance is not a loop, it is a climb. Repentance is not returning. Repentance is rising. It is the vertical correction of Əʋe. Returning without rising is stagnation. Rising without returning is chaos. True repentance is spiral, each cycle closing at a higher plane, each lift establishing a new level of being. This is the geometry of repentance. This is the architecture of ascent. This is the Əʋe, ancient Hebrew understanding of transformation.